Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Andrei Soroker, CEO of Fogbender, a team messaging support platform. Andrei, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really excited to chat about your background, what you're working on at Fogbender, and overall just get into the weeds with some of the interesting stuff you've done in your career and what you're working on now. So thank you again for being on the show. And just to jump right into it, what were you doing before you started Fogbender?
I was working at a company that acquired my previous startup.
Yeah. How was that experience? I don't think a lot of founders, or maybe that always on their agenda, like maybe it's a merger acquisition, an IPO. What's the experience like going through the process of acquisition? First of all, was it a good experience?
Oh, I mean, yeah. So there's like this world of middle of the road acquisitions that there's sort of like soft landings, right? Where you're not, it's not a life changing, not as like not a retirement situation, but as a founder, you eventually have to make a choice. Like if it's not really happening, what do you do?
Yeah.
So, I think everything considered, it was probably the best outcome that we could have, knowing what we knew then. Like I made plenty of mistakes, but I think that, it was a good experience, at the end of the day. But it's really hard to find, these like the stories basically, because they're generally not told. You hear stories of, crazy outcomes. Everyone's kind of like sings those songs, but you also hear of, these acqui-hires, right? Where a team just gets absorbed. And we did, our acquisition was, an actual, like we became a subsidiary. So it wasn't an asset deal. It was like a real acquisition. It wasn't very big, but I think it was a great experience. I'll never kind of make the same mistakes again. But by the way, I'm always happy to talk to founders who are facing the reality of having to sell sometime, maybe next year. The biggest mistake I made, I'll tell you, is I didn't start looking for a buyer soon enough.
Yeah. What is that process? When you kind of you identify that you have to sell, and you're looking for the right partner to or right company to kind of absorb your company, and what is the process like? Kind of going out and in those conversations. What is that? What is that like?
Yeah. So our situation was a little bit unique. So this was a product called SameRoom.io. That was our previous company, and we were an integrator. So we dealt with a lot of different products, and we knew a lot of people. Like we knew people at Microsoft, at Slack, at Atlassian. So we had a little bit of an unfair advantage in terms of already having some relationships forged just by virtue of being an integrator. But in general, you need some relationships. So it's, as a founder, like before you're thinking about selling, while you're still kind of aiming for the stratosphere, it's always a good idea to meet people who might eventually buy you, even though you're not even thinking about it, because those connections might come in handy. And those connections are never like corp dev. They're never the folks who buy companies. They're apparatchiks, they're not really, they're not going to be particularly passionate about you or anything that you're doing. They're just like trying to get you the least amount of money and to like close the deal. That's their job. What you got to do is talk to ideally the founders of these companies that might eventually buy you, or product people, VP of products, SVP of product, EVP of product. Those are the folks you want to know, because they're the ones who tend to spearhead acquisitions. You make a list, and then you just like go down that list, and you set up, meetings, and you try to see if you can make something happen.
Yeah. What are the different, was the type of acquisition that you went through, was that the only option that you were considering, or what are the different types of options that you can consider as a company who's looking to sell?
Yeah. So I was assuming you've raised some money. And unless you're in a great position of having built a great company that somebody wants to buy for $1 billion or something, or even 100 million, like a big amount of money. if you're looking at a small acquisition is like, it was then maybe single digit millions. Now maybe it's like very, very low, double digit millions kind of thing. You're basically looking at potentially returning money to investors. And that's a huge calculation. So like we had multiple offers from companies that were like, oh yeah, we'd love to like get your team onboarded here. We're not going to give any money to your investors, but here's like a fat incentive package for you, your co-founder and your team. And I was like, thank you, but we took all this money, we got to return it. So I was optimizing for returning cash to investors. Yeah. I think that was a mistake. I think actually that was from a personal growth perspective, it was clear my investors didn't need that money. It didn't make a difference. But it would have made a big difference for me to maybe sell to maybe like a bigger company or, more successful company and make more money as a result. But I was very clear on like, I don't care what happened. Like we're going to try to do the best that we can do by our team, but we're going to absolutely maximize the return to our investors. So, and I think that was in retrospect a mistake.
Yeah. What was it like joining another organization now as a team member, and finding, I'm assuming there's some kind of challenge with just like redistributing, whether it's like responsibilities or relearning kind of a process or anything like that. What was the experience on, kind of having different responsibilities completely from, founding and leading a company to having an agenda, that's set for you?
So there's essentially like two like parallel processes that are happening here. One is it's an enormous relief to not have to worry about payroll, to not, because I mean, again, as a founder of a company maybe that isn't killing it, you're like, whoa, you're worried, right? Like if you can't raise, if it's difficult to raise money, if your cash flow isn't quite there, you don't have to worry about it. Once you join a large company, there's money there, right? You have to understand that maybe not forever, like every company has issues, who knows? But it's like this immediate relief of not having to be responsible for all these people's salaries. The other problem, of course, is that like you want to protect these people, but you kind of no longer have the, I think it's called air cover to do so, because really you're at the mercy of your new bosses. For us, it was quite difficult, so we stayed together as a team for a while and then they started pulling us apart. It was difficult. It was you get into like this big machine that really doesn't care about anything, or any individual in particular. So navigating, you essentially go from like trying to build a product for your customers to trying to become a politician, because the only way you win in a company, in a larger company as a mid-level manager, is by being a good politician. And those skill sets are often essentially disjoint. Like being a good politician often means you cannot build products. You can't talk to customers, like, and I think the best founders are able to do both, probably. I would say that that's not me. Like, I'm not a good politician.
Yeah. What is it? Was there any like takeaways from being a part of a larger organization that you now maybe use in terms of whether it's structure, strategy, operationally, that you use in your current startup that, it was a benefit of that experience?
Well, I think it was my first time working at a larger company. And I think, again, as a founder, again, I'm probably like, I can recognize, I got to sell now. I got to sell into the similar companies to the one where I used to work. It's very beneficial to understand what titles mean. It's beneficial to understand what the incentives are. Mm-hmm. Having seen kind of the sausage, factory from the inside, you can extrapolate and try to understand, like, whether someone is actually in a position to buy your stuff or not. that's probably the biggest benefit, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just less of a mystery to me.
Yeah.
But I think a lot, these larger companies, they differ quite a bit. And the older the company, the more layers of complexity you're going to discover. Yeah.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
inspired you to then take the leap and start Fogbender?
So yeah, I never like intended to stop, trying to build my big product that everybody's going to love. I think the acquisition was just a temporary, kind of it wasn't a setback. It was just an experience. But I mean, I think I stumbled upon what I consider to be a pretty big problem while working at this company. And the problem is sort of so I've been working in team messaging for almost 10 years now. My first product was essentially, a team messaging system that ended up being very similar to Slack. And I really believe in team-based communication. Like, I think it's a really wonderful medium. And I believe in team-to-team support. So I think that the best support between two companies that are, where you have a vendor and a customer selling something complicated, the best medium for maximizing information flow and information exchange and retention of knowledge is essentially through a shared channel, right? Where you're sharing a common space where both teams are able to churn, because people leave on both sides, but they still retain all the information that's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran into these issues while working at this larger company, where I was on the customer side of things, and I was really struggling to even know who the other users were on my own team and my own company, working like with this big vendor. And I wanted for there to be a system that was like available by default to the vendor where they can buy it, and I would have the ability then to receive support in a way that the rest of my colleagues, would that would be visible to the rest of my colleagues. So it's a really simple want, but it's kind of a difficult, it's kind of hard to get. And so I started thinking about it pretty seriously. Like it was a 3-year stint at this company, and in the last year, I pretty much spent most of my mental capacity thinking about this problem and interviewing potential customers, and then I was like, let's try to do this, because I think there's something there.
Yeah. During the interview process, were there a couple guiding questions that like helped illuminate what the product should be?
I mean, I've had this hunch for a long time that companies that use shared channels for customer support are kind of they're doing this reluctantly. They go into it with open, it's wonderful initially because you have such an incredible access, to your customer's team. But once you start scaling, it's pretty clear that turns into more of a liability than a bonus. And you start like taking this good thing and you're taking it away from people, both your team and the customer's team. And I was trying to confirm that hypothesis. Like, do you love using, shared channels for customer support? Yes. Do you hate using shared channels for customer support? Yes. When you see this, like, yes, I love it, I also hate it, by the same person at the same time, like there's something there, there's gotta be a problem. And I just basically got like a bunch of these folks who are doing this to say, yes, I hate it, yes, I love it. And I thought, let's try to see if we can find a solution so that we can take the hate out.
Yeah. What's the solution then? Where did you find that you could create this platform or the technology that took the hate out of it? What was the solution there?
So it's still evolving, but my basic concept hasn't changed. It's still there. And it's, the idea is incredibly simple. As a user of some sort of a B2B software, you've got access to a dashboard where you can sign in with your account and you can see the rest of your teammates who also have accounts within the same environment. What you don't have usually is a support environment where you can all talk together inside of the dashboard. So think of it as like intercom where the rest of your teammates are present. It just doesn't exist. Unless you know about Fogbender, that thing doesn't exist. Even if you really wanted it, you can't buy it. You got to come to us. There's no other option. And so our initial product and our initial like implementation is that widget that you can just install. And as long as you can tell Fogbender like, hey, here, all these people signing into this environment, they all work at the same company. Put them all in the same widget so they can talk to each other. So if one of them asks a question, then the rest of them would be able to get a notification and potentially respond. So, but what happened next was really surprising to me. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but SameRoom, my previous product, it was an interoperability system for team messaging. So like you could sit in Skype and a Skype group, right? Not DM, but group, and talk to someone in IRC channel, right? Or talk to someone in a Slack channel or a Telegram group. So it was an under the hood. We didn't have a user interface. And so we started getting requests from customers to integrate with, like, say, Microsoft Teams, because their customers are sitting in Microsoft Teams. They're not necessarily using a widget on their website. And we ended up we started building these integrations. So yeah, there is this widget that our customer can put on their website, similar to Intercom, but that widget actually has the same information as a dedicated Microsoft Teams channel that is run by the customer, right? So they invite, they install our bot into that channel, and then all of a sudden, like, there's this connectivity between an internal system, Microsoft Teams, to the support environment. And then we have the same thing now for Slack. So unexpectedly, we kind of rebuilt SameRoom, but with a very, kind of a much greater focus on support. And we now have a system of record that sits in the middle and is actually recording everything. We have an interface now. So that's kind of been the evolution of this product.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting to get back into the interoperability world. I was going to do that.
Yeah. What are some things that what are some aspects about team messaging that we don't consider, that companies don't consider, that you've seen are extremely important, and that some successful companies do well and others may not do well?
I'm not sure that I have the answer to that question. I do think that in general, like the direction that team messaging took as a result of Slack becoming very successful, and Slack is really conceptually a continuation of IRC, where you've got these huge channels that are destinations, like they've got people there, there's presence, and then they started to try to take that model and apply it to these large companies. I think that like direction is probably incorrect in general, because I think large channels as destinations, and you can see, like, I think threads and Slack, okay, people use them, but if you think about it, they're kind of crazy because they're unnamed, right? Yeah. They're difficult/impossible to navigate, right?
Yeah.
So it's to me, like, that world of threading and Microsoft Teams. Why does Microsoft Teams has threads? Why is it built the way it's built? It's because Slack didn't have threads, and Microsoft Teams is like, oh, well, we're going to just like do just like Slack, except with threads. So they basically took like that. You're essentially seeing these products existing the way they exist, not because that's like what the market wanted, but it's because like a competitor didn't do this thing that they thought was necessary. But I think the reason for the ask for this threading was because Slack conceptually created these channels that are really, really difficult to, it's hard to create new channels. They're not lightweight. They're not easy to deal with. They're not easy to maneuver around. So and I could be wrong, but in my kind of version of super functional team messaging is where it's basically like, it's like Tmux, right? Where you
Yeah.
just create these windows all over the place, and they're lightweight and you can move them around, and you're free to move messages between them. And maybe it's yet to be proven, but that's basically what the Fogbender UI. This is like the fourth time I'm building something like this. That's kind of what it aims to do. I think that there is a lighter weight messaging paradigm where rooms are lightweight. They're not like these destinations.
Yeah.
Where it's easy to reply to messages. It's easy to I almost think of it as almost like Git, right? So you have these branches, and you potentially are rebasing on, on top of an existing branch. You're taking a bunch of commits and like introducing them to another context. Like that's a really powerful, I think, metaphor that might work in team messaging, but of course we have to hide most of that complexity. And I think when you look at conventional, and I think this is most applicable in places where retaining context is very valuable, which is really, where is that? That's in customer support, right? Because as a customer support agent, you're very likely to be dealing with 15 different customers at the same time. If you have to switch between like these heavy duty channels, right? So you essentially have to visit you have to get up, like go out of the house, get into another house, like understand what's happening in the kitchen. It's a lot of work. But then you look at these conventional contact center solutions. They're all tiled solutions. They enable you to see multiple things at the same time. They enable to retain context. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic probably a little bit, but your question was like, what are companies missing? Well, I think they're missing, they're missing the tooling that makes team messaging less painful, more pleasurable to use, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I love the thought behind the destination piece, because thinking about it as that is the experience. And we use Slack, Slack Connect, where you connect, companies between Slack channels, and the idea and that it's a beautiful idea in ways to communicate and connect. But like the whole destination piece just resonates deeply, because it's like, I do have to introduce myself, reintegrate myself to that environment to then understand and address whatever the next step or topic of choice is. And so, thinking about the time it takes to do that, it is a substantial commitment to revisit that destination. So, I mean, I love the analogy there. And get up, get out of my house, go into another house, because that is the feeling that I get, and that's the weight of that movement. So, it's super fascinating to think about it more centralized in what the Fogbender UI and what the technology is doing. What are some of the biggest risks that Fogbender faces today?
Well, it's the same risk as any startup, pre-product market fit startup faces, and that is that nobody wants your stuff. That's the only risk.
Yeah.
There really are no other risks.
Well, how do you go through that process? Are there any strategies you use, or are you just talking to customers every day and just trying to reconfigure your product to be exactly what they need?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think my goal has been to find a model customer and for me to believe that customer represents a pattern that we can replicate. And I think we've found that customer, and that's how we're trying to overcome the nobody wants your stuff problem. That's the biggest problem. You have other problems. I mean, I think the another huge problem is like co-founders getting tired of doing the stuff that they're doing. Like that could destroy a startup very easily. But these are human problems. These are not product problems. They're certainly there, but I think that fundamentally the biggest concern for any company that's trying to discover something new is facing the reality that it's incredibly likely that nobody wants the thing that you're building. And you're if you've put a few years into it, it becomes harder and harder to turn on a dime and do something else. Eventually you run out of money, you know. It's a really, really difficult journey, but I think some people are kind of built to go through it.
Yeah, I agree there. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Fogbender?
Yeah, I think so basically I look at the customer support space, you know, and there's a lot of companies in that space. There's like Zendesk and Intercom and Front and ServiceNow and Salesforce Service Cloud. And then there's like maybe 20 others that are big, right? And I have this theory, I don't think it's incorrect, that essentially all of them fundamentally focus on serving companies that sell to consumers. Like that's where most of their engineering resources goes. That's where most of their marketing goes. They really are optimizing for companies that have millions and millions of users, because that's where the complexity is. If you think about it, you know, you've got lots of agents. You got to route these requests. You got to, you know, have great analytics. And because B2B companies don't have that many users, like their users pay a lot more money per account. These are orders of magnitude greater, like, you know, deals, right? But so all these existing support solutions are ignoring the needs of these B2B companies that might actually be really successful. You know, maybe they only have 2,000 accounts, but like they're a public company. There's a lot of them like that. What I'd like to do, like my vision, is to take a chunk out of every one of these support solutions that they don't even know about, which is their B2B, kind of like misplaced, misguided, like, you know, B2B piece of the pie, and build something very specific for these B2B companies that really helps them take their, you know, make their products better, make more money, because they essentially learn to excel at support. You know, today, a lot of these companies, they just hire people, you know, humans really, to just prop up the needs of supporting the complexity that inevitably exists between the vendor and a customer, you know, when it's multiplied by a really complex product. They just hire people, which is expensive. I mean, it's just expensive. It's just a lot of money. And those people generally aren't engineers. So they're not particularly knowledgeable about like the technologies that they're supporting. They're literally there to like know that maybe somebody stopped responding and they got to like ring this loud bell and they got to bring in the cavalry. It's a lot of money to do this. And their end result isn't fantastic for either side. You know, I think the customer's team doesn't really get the best support. The vendor's team is spending a ton of money on, you know, like spooning out water, you know, from a situation. So, I mean, that's the end result. And I don't know if it's a public company yet, or whether it's like a tiny little feature that, you know, kind of a feature level thing that people might find useful. Mm-hmm. My dream is that I think it might be a public company if that slice is big enough and we're able to find a hook into the market, right? To get these B2B companies to start switching.
Yeah.
Love that.
No, I love it. And I love the honesty that you have with the experience that you go through, and how you're discovering not only the usability, but the efficacy and all the different important aspects of your product. And it sounds like we've caught you mixed in that journey, which is always exciting, to kind of uncover, you know, the thought process behind founders and how they're, you know, going through that journey, because I think it's a true honest experience too, you know, when you're building a startup or you're having a product or a service, you know, the different things you have to consider, but also I guess, you know, not knowing the end result always, but continuing to take the steps towards some greater understanding. But yeah, no, I know we're coming at time, and I definitely want to ask my bonus question, one for selfish research, but also for my audience as well. I always love to ask founders this because, you know, we come with a wealth of knowledge, but what books or people have influenced you the most?
With books or people? That's a good question. You know, I'm not a big reader of business books, but one business book I read a few years ago was, I think it was called the Matsushita Leadership. and I remember the exact, but this is the guy who founded what became Panasonic, and it follows his journey, which covers like most of the 20th century. He lived a pretty long life. And it was actually kind of fascinating because, so this is obviously a Japanese man. And, you know, his company, which became Panasonic, and this was years ago. But, you know, obviously Japan went through war and as a loser, right? Like as a very difficult moment. And kind of, so I actually grew up in Russia. I moved to the Bay Area when I was 13, but I still have some of my team members that are there, and I'm, you know, I identify as like Russian, right? I can't do anything about that. And now, like my country started in essentially like a completely aggressive, illegal war.
Yeah.
And I keep going back, and I have to, my biggest challenge, my company has to survive, however difficult it is for me personally. However, you know, just debilitating this realization that all of a sudden, like the reputation of my people are tarnished forever for the rest of my life, for the rest of my people's my children's lives, you know, it's grandchildren's lives. It's not recoverable, right? As far as I'm concerned. And how do you survive? How do you sort of like deal with that? And I actually going back to the Matsushita leadership book, you know, well, they dealt with it and they sort of got over it, and then they emerged through incredibly difficult times. They were emerged on top eventually. So obviously we're not like based in Russia. We're not building airplanes for the Russian military, but just mentally, you know, that's something that I found helpful. Like it was a cool thing that I'd read, and it's kind of helped me find my compass, my bearing a little bit.
Is there anything that he said in that book that you particularly, you know, use or remind yourself of, whether it's like an inspirational quote or message or overall kind of feeling that was inspired by the Matsushita's experience?
You know, it's a story of resilience, you know, decades of resilience, and just whatever the odds, figuring out a way to solve the problems that face this company. And then, you know, becoming one of I think the biggest Japanese company ever, right? Like, it's not a quote. Again, I read it probably 8 years ago, so it's not super fresh in my mind. And I mean, also it's not a it's not a business book, but Schirer's the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich is a great book to sort of see how large systems are built and destroyed, and how, you know, horrible decisions can influence millions of people's lives. You know, again, I'm sorry to go into kind of like the dark.
No. I love the different perspectives. No, I love the different perspective, because I think there's just honesty in both sides of experiences. And you know, business books get old after a while. They take maybe one concept and write 100, 200 pages about it. They probably have been summarized in maybe one or two. But the life experience books, just the way you can extrapolate messages or experiences and use them in your own life are so much, I think, can be so much more substantial in how they affect you long term. You know, you can read, you know, the business book and maybe use it in day-to-day operations, but then forget about it once you know, kind of mature as a company. But the life experience books, you remember those messages and you remember those stories because they kind of hit viscerally. So no sorry is needed. No problem.
Yeah, but I think two more things I'd say in terms of, I mean, if you're just, you know, looking at starting a company, I think that the two, so Innovator's Dilemma was a book that made a big, had a really big influence on me. I think, you know, you got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but it's essentially a story of disruption, right? And I mean, I think that maybe some of the examples that they're in the book are, I'm not sure that they'd survive the test of time, but fundamentally it's an incredible, if you haven't thought about it before, it's a wonderful, easy read that explains how existing, you know, sort of calcified systems give way to newer things, right?
Yeah.
And the other source of reading material has been that's really important to me is definitely Paul Graham's essays. Not all of them, and I mean some of them are just not very good, but the ones that are good are incredible, right? And they certainly helped me understand early on kind of like what it means to found a company, to build something, just try to build something that people want. I mean, a great source of wisdom for sure.
Yeah. Well, Andrei, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited to share this with the audience. I think your perspective is definitely unique. I think there's just a lot of breadth to your experience that you've had, and I appreciate you sharing the story about the merger and acquisition and the influence that it had, an impact, but also how you think and continue to think about product and building product is fascinating. And also I think there's just a lot that we can take from it. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. I really hope you enjoyed your time. And I thank you for being on the show, man.
Thanks, Julian. I really appreciate it.
Of course.